I'm Xanderwood. I make indie games and tutorials on game development. I also play your indie games every week on my channel. Make sure you subscribe and click that bell icon so you never miss a video.
Hey everyone, welcome back to I Remake Castlevania on the NES using Construct 3. In this episode, we are going to be working on the little player character. We're going to continue the animations. I was considering doing this off camera and just kind of starting the video with a player character fully ready with all the animation cycles. But I kind of don't want to take anything away, because I know that some of you guys will probably want to watch the process of how I develop these characters and animate them. So if you don't want to do that, then feel free to skip ahead to the point where the character is finished and continue from there. But if you do want to kind of go through the trenches with me and design it yourself and see how I do it and watch my trials and my errors, then continue to watch. Also, if you're enjoying the series so far, I would very much appreciate it if you could hit the like button. It does help YouTube put my video out there to more people that might want to watch it. So with all that said, let's start the next animation cycle. So we've got idle, we've got walk, we now need to do crouch. So I'm going to duplicate the walk cycle because his legs are already split, and for the crouch I want them to be split. So I'm going to click duplicate. I'm going to rename this one to crouch, and I'm going to delete the third frame and the second and the first, and I've just got this one here now with the legs split. And then all I'm going to do for this one is get the head. I'm going to draw a box around it. I'm just going to drag it down 2. Then I'm going to drag the whole body just to the base of the arm here, and I'm going to drag that down to 1 pixel above the floor. Now with the eraser, I'm just going to tidy up that outside line. Now we do want his leg to be different because at the moment his leg's quite squashed. So what would happen is if he was crouching down here, his knee would actually be coming quite high, probably up to around the kind of bottom of the chest area there. And I also think we can bring the foot back 1. And then just continue that white line up. And I'm thinking to come in 1. Oh, there. Yeah, I'm going to get that white line. I'm going to put it there and there. Take that middle one away. And then his back leg, the knee would actually be on the floor rather than the foot here. So if we grab the color of the back leg here, go back to crouch, the knee is probably going to come somewhere down there and up to there. And then the foot would be kind of upwards rather than horizontal, so vertically rather than horizontal. We're not going to need those lines there. And the foot is probably a little bit long, although 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually shorter than that one, but I still think it's a little long because his toes would kind of be bent underneath, which I'm not going to draw with the white. And like with the other side, I'm going to bring it in 1 there. And I think draw up from there. Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. But just to break up this solid corner, I'm going to just put that block there. And I want to make it slightly darker where the toes touch the ground. So I'm going to take that shoe color, that boot color, I'm going to make it slightly darker. I'm just going to draw 2 pixels along there. I also think if he's crouching, his head would probably be a little bit further forward. Although if I do that, I'm going to cut off the front of his hat. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it exactly where it is. Then his idle and his crouch position. Yeah, that's good for me. I'm going to keep it like that. We're going to animate it like we do with the idle, because if we're holding crouch for a period of time, we don't just want a static image on the screen, we want it to be animated. So I'm going to duplicate that frame, and I'm going to do exactly what I did with the idle. I'm going to just have him kind of shrugging and head bobbing. Now his head's already quite low, so I'm going to pop it up 1. And I'm going to bring that in there. And again, I don't want to double up on this outside line. Yeah. The bag's not going to move though, is it? Because the bag will stay in one place. Draw that line down. Fill that back in. And then when he's down, the arm is going to come up. So we're going to grab that whole arm. I'm going to bring it up 1. And I'm going to just colour in the bottom of the leg. There. Now the speed will be the same as the idle, which is 2 on a loop. And then we play. He's kind of idling in his crouch position. Same as he is in his up position. So right, so let's go and put that into the events. So now we've got, if S is down, then we're going to change the state, but we're not going to add anything in terms of simulating direction because we can't do that. So we're just going to simply change the state to crouch. Now we come down on here into our movement states group, and I'm going to just copy out the idle and hit V, Control C, Control V to paste a copy, and I'm just going to change idle to crouch. And then if he is in crouch, then we're going to just play the crouch animation. And it's not working. Why is it not working? Let's have a look. So this condition here, look, if A and D is not down, set to idle. And obviously if we're not pushing A and D, but we are pushing S, then this is true, which puts him in idle, which then negates this crouch. So what we need to do is add a third condition here. So I'm going to click into this box here, just in the middle bit, which is just the keyboard and S. I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag that down into this group. It can be absolutely anywhere in the group, but I like to put it at the bottom. In fact, that's a complete lie. Delete that. We need to take this line here, the system state equals crouch. Drag that up into the box. So we've got 3 in that box now. And then select the crouch and push I on the keyboard. And now this reads, if A and D are not down and we're not crouching, then set state to idle. So now we can crouch. But then when we let go of S, we stay in the crouch position until we push A and D, which is not what we want. We want, as soon as S is released, we want to go back to idle. So we can copy this whole line of code here, Control C, Control V, double click in where it says keyboard S is down, go back a couple of times, or just once, and we can say on key released S, and then we're going to change the state back to idle, and that should work pretty much fine. So now we can hold down. If we're holding down, we're going to play that animation. If we let go, we're going to stand up. We can move left and right, and we can crouch. Perfect. We can even jump in a crouch position, which we're going to need to address because that looks silly. If we're jumping, we want to play the jump animation, which we don't have now, but we will address that as we go. But for the most part, for what we want now, this is working fine, except this. If we're holding S and D or A, that's not going to work. So again, we need to fix that next. And all that is just conflicting statements. So we've got a situation where if A and S are down, then he will go into the crouch position and just move left. So we just need to set these conditions. So we're going to take this state equals crouch, hold down Control, and I'm going to drag it up to A, and I'm going to drag it into D. So now our code reads, if A is down but we're not crouching, and if D is down but we're not crouching. So effectively, if we're crouching, we're not going to be going anywhere. As soon as I push S, he crouches. I can't move until I stand back up again. So we can run, hit S, and he crouches immediately, which is good. It gives us a little bit more control on the player, especially if we're ducking under a projectile. we can be moving forward. We hit S, we don't move forward anymore, and then we've got the option to then attack if we want to. So let's go and add that attack animation in right now. So double click on the player. I'm going to take the walk. I think I'm going to do the walk one again because I want the legs split. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to change this to, I'm going to change it to whip because we're going to have a couple of different attacks because don't forget there is a secondary weapon that we will be able to collect and that will change based on what we've picked up. But the whip will always be the primary weapon. So I'm going to call it whip. I'm going to delete frame 3 and 0 and 1 and I'm going to keep frame this one with the legs open. Now what we need to do here is we need to change the size of the sprite. Now you've got to be careful when you do this because if you get this wrong and you don't get the image point in exactly the right place, then your character sprite is going to be jittery and jump all over the place. What I want to change on this one is the width, and I'm going to change it to 32. And that is exactly what I want. I want that big space out in the front. If yours didn't come in like this, you can simply just drag the player wherever you want, but I am pretty happy with that. Now, image point. You see that it's exactly 1 pixel away from the left foot there. That's really, really important. If you go back to the walk cycle, it is exactly that place there, because if it's not, then when you're moving and you're using different animations, he's going to be kind of glitching around from place to place. So just make sure that that is in exactly the same place, and then this additional space on the right is not even going to matter because the player is going to remain in the same place. Now we need to do the whip animation. Now let's have a quick look at what that looks like in the game. So you can see there's a bit of a recoil on it. It starts behind him. So when the it looks like when the button is pressed, the first frame is the arm going backwards with the whip behind, and then it flicks forward. So let's create that first frame. So let's get rid of this arm because that arm is going to be in a completely different place. I'm just going to drag that along there. Oh. What I like to do with my artwork is just tidy it up before I change anything that needs to be moved. So that looks pretty good to me. Now we need the arm color, so we can go back to the idle and take a copy of that. And then this would kind of work. His arm would kind of be up here. I don't like that. His elbow would be there, and then his upper arm would be here, but then his hand would also be up there, so his arm's almost doubling up. We're going to need to make use of that shadow for the back part of the arm there, and then we'll put the hand at the top there. That looks okay to me. Maybe a bit of shadow on the wrist and the forearm, although that makes it look a bit too fat. He doesn't want fat forearms. I'm going to put the shadow there because it's kind of up against the side of the face. Now we need that kind of that whip. Now the color I think will do for this. I think it's going to have to be a kind of chain link, kind of steel blue color, just so we can separate it from everything else, because the background in the game is going to be, I think, reasonably dark. But I mean, we can always change it later. So let's go a little lighter. I don't want to get too close to white because I don't want it to kind of be absorbed into the background. Let's do that and that. And then I think the handle maybe should be a slightly darker color. There. And then the actual chain can be lighter. And I think it starts like in a kind of curl like that. But my only concern with that is, does it blend in too much? Do we need to go darker? just so we can definitely see the difference between the two. Yeah, I think that's probably better. We're going to go with that. Again, I reserve the right to change it later, as do you, of course. Frame 2. In fact, let's have a look at his... Yeah, so for this one, I'm going to copy the idle. Not the idle, sorry. I'm going to copy the walk cycle again. I'm just going to copy that one out. I don't like to redraw things and edit them too much. Let's delete that one, put that one back in, put him there. So now all I have to do is redo the arm, because redoing all of that would just be a bit fiddly. I'm going to keep the arm up there. I'm going to keep all of this the same. I think I used the wrong leg. What a ninny. Let's just colour it out. Save redoing it. Take that dark colour. Feel free to skip through this. This was my mistake. I coloured out the wrong one. There we go. And then he's going to be throwing that forward. And there's hand, like a punch. Let's take the shadow. The shadow will be underneath. And then the handle is going to be there. And then the actual whip will be there. And I think it had like a little ball on the end. There. Is that long enough for a whip, you ask? And the answer is, I don't know. How long should a whip be? Maybe it needs to look a little bit longer. Or actually, it's a ball on the end, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's probably pretty good. Let's just put a few little shadows in there. And then, obviously, under the arm here, we'll have some shadow. And there's the first 2 frames of the attack. Obviously, when he hits, there's going to be a flick back on the whip. So let's duplicate that. I think there's probably going to be 2 frames where it hits. So let's add another frame. Just thinking in terms of the animation, there'll be 2 frames where it hits, and then let's just take the ball here. When it hits there, it's probably going to flick back to about there. Yeah, but the arm would also flick downwards, I would imagine. Let's put that there. Flick back, and then it will be probably back to that one. Let's see what that looks like. It's not going to loop. I think it'll be on a speed of 10. Yeah. Did that recoil frame here? Did that show? Let's see. Let's put it in. Let's see what happens. Now, you can pick your own buttons for what buttons you want the attack to be. I'm going to use the arrow keys. I'm going to set a new group for this. Add a subgroup, and we're going to call this attacking. And then we're going to say player, And we're going to compare the state again, because everything's going to be done with states. Sorry, the state is global. We're going to compare the state, and we're going to say is whip. If the state is equal to whip, then we're going to play that animation. Set animation to whip. Now, if you're kind of clued up and savvy with all of what's been going on, you're probably going to be thinking to yourself now, well, there's going to be some confliction now, because if we're pushing attack but we're also moving, then which one is it going to play? And let's see. In fact, we've got to put a button in to make that happen. So up here in our commands, I'm going to copy out the S is down. No, the W is pressed. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to move this to the bottom. I'm going to push Q on the keyboard with it selected, which will put a comment above it. And I'm just going to write attacking, because I want to keep things organized. If we select this top box here just on the left and push Q, you're going to get a comment. I'm going to type in moving, just so at a glance I can look through and see where the lines are that control which bits of what I'm trying to work on. Double click on keyboard W. Instead of W, I'm going to use the arrow keys. I'm going to use the up arrow for the whip, and I'm going to use the right arrow for the weapon, the alternative weapon. So on pressed, then, oh, we're not going to need that. We can delete that line there. We just want to change the state, so I can copy this one down, and we're going to change the state to whip. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, when we press that, we're going to change the state to whip, which will then put this in a constant state of yes, this is true, then this animation is going to either play continuously over and over again, or it's not going to play at all because it's going to be continuously restarting. And if you're thinking that, then you would be correct. So by pushing the up arrow now, nothing is working. And the reason for that, like I mentioned, is we're constantly in this state every single frame, which means this animation never gets to play, because every single frame it restarts it. So we need to make a sub event by selecting the whole block, pushing B and saying system trigger once while true, and then bring the animation down into that. So every time we hit the state whip, we're only going to play it once. And when I push the button, nothing happens. And the reason for that is because of this condition. The same thing that tripped us up before is because AD is not down and we're not crouching, it's not going to play whip because we've already told it to play idle. So we need to copy out this state here. So if we just select this little block here, push Control C and Control V, we're going to duplicate it. And now we need to change this to whip. So again, we're just building on our conditions every time we add something new. So now this reads, if we're not moving left or right, we're not crouching, and we're not in the state of whip, then we set it to idle. So now it's going to let us do it. And there it is. Perfect. But he then finishes his animation, and he just stands there looking like he's ready to be hit again until we decide to move. But yeah, I think he looks pretty good. He obviously turns around. I think the color of the whip is probably blending in with the background a bit, but I'm not too worried about that now because we haven't finalized the background art. What we need to do now is set up a event that puts him back into idle. So like we did with the crouch, when we said if S is released then send him back to idle, we could do something similar, but the problem we're going to have is because we're not holding down the attack button, we've already released it. That logic isn't going to be true. So the easiest thing to do here is, and if we come down to add event at the bottom, we can say player, and then we can go to the animation section and say on finished, and then we want to say on finished whip. So basically what that says is when the animation whip has finished playing, then we can set the state back to idle by copying that and dragging it down, and then that whole block can then sit up here underneath this one for attacking. So now when he finishes attacking, he's going to go back to idle, which is exactly what we want. And we can jump and attack. We can attack. We can't crouch and attack yet because we haven't put that in, but we're starting to build this guy out in some kind of functional way. And I think it's looking pretty good. We may play around with the animation. I don't know, we may tweak it, but again, it's not an animation or a pixel art tutorial. We're looking to get the mechanics in place to remake this Castlevania game. But so far so good. I'm going to leave it there because I don't want these episodes to be too long. We're going to build it bit by bit, and hopefully by the end of things we're going to have a pretty decent kind of clone of the Castlevania NES game. So again, if you've made it this far, then thanks for sticking around to the very end. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've enjoyed the content, or if you've learned something new. And if you want to see more content and more tutorials like this, if you're not already subscribed, you can hit the subscribe button, and you'll never miss a future video or an episode. And as always, before we finish, just a massive shout out to my Patreon supporters: James Welch, Basic Terror, Cole, Tomorrow Lexic, Zan, Retro Galaxy, Clone 13, Foozle CC, Jet Simon, Van, Alex Fedorov, and Arto YYJez. Thanks very much, guys, for supporting my Patreon journey. I do appreciate all the support, and I hope you're enjoying the Patreon benefits.